All right, well, good morning, Midtown family. Happy New Year. Welcome back, particularly those of you who've been traveling over the holidays. It's so good that you'd come make time to gather with your spiritual family here this morning. So look forward to seeing what God does with us this morning. If you are relatively new or visiting, I do see some new faces. My name's Justin. I serve as the associate pastor here at Midtown, and just so glad that you're visiting. Our hope for you is that you'd experience God's love for you this morning, and I'd love to meet you too, so come say hi on your way out. As we start the new calendar year, we wanted to do a short series that's going to help us kind of set some priorities for 2026. Now, I don't know if you're the type that likes to make resolutions. I'm personally not, but it's okay. I like to maybe consider them goals or starting the new year thinking just reflectively about things that I hope would happen in the next year or maybe even just the spring. So whether you want to call them resolutions or goals, what we want to do is help spend some time over these next 3 weeks helping us think about our priorities, and specifically how this year we can make it our aim to seek God and his kingdom. Our key verse for this whole series is Matthew 6:33, probably one that some of you are familiar with. I love that during the last series, during Advent, we actually encouraged everyone to memorize it. And so I actually hope that we would actually memorize this too. So that's a challenge for you. It's shorter, it's even easier. But hope that you guys would memorize this as we really reflect on this verse and all that it means in several different ways, which I'll explain in a bit. But I thought for fun, we could actually read it out loud together to start here. So Matthew 6:33, together. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. All right, Jake's gonna talk a little bit more about all of these things that are given to you as well next week. This week, I just want to draw your attention to one simple word as we start. First. It's a matter of thinking what things need to be first in our lives. So as we set our resolutions, we set our goals, or we think about maybe new habits or things we want to develop in this coming year, I want to challenge us to think, how can we seek God first and make him and whatever goals that we're setting or things we want to do, make them be oriented toward seeking him first. And so that's what we're going to do during this series, and particularly today in one distinct way. It's actually been told that if you wanted to determine what someone's priorities are, there's 3 easy things you can do to figure out what they are. You want to know what they are? Look at their calendar, look at their bank account, and know their thoughts. Now, thankfully, those aren't exposed to most of us, right? Those things don't stay exposed. We might not like it if they were exposed, but in reality, if you think about those things, if you think about your time, how you spend your time, your calendar, that's a determination of your priorities. You think about your money, wherever you're funneling your money, that shows what things you care about. And you think about your thoughts, the things that you think about most often will help determine, you could say even what your functional God is, but at least what your priorities are. And so in this series, we're going to look at those 3 things specifically. We're going to look at, in this series, how we can rearrange our calendars, meaning our time, to seek God first. How we can rearrange our bank accounts, our money, to seek God first. And how we can reorient our thoughts, meaning our attention span, the things we think about, to seek God first. And so today, as the first one, we're going to talk about calendars. That sounds really fun, doesn't it? Calendars. But think about it, your calendars, your schedules, your routines, they say a ton about the priorities that you set. You know, simply put, you could actually say that you make time for what you prioritize. It's pretty simple. I know actually a few years ago, I decided I was going to get kind of this, phrase that we sometimes hear in, common vernacular. We hear the phrase sometimes, well, I just didn't have time for that. No, of course, that's a true statement. There's things we just didn't have time for. But I reflected many years ago on what I'm really saying when I'm saying that is a deeper meaning. What I'm really saying when I say that is I didn't make that a priority. Other things took precedence over that. And so I didn't get time for that really as that was not a priority compared to other things in my life. That's what it really means, because in a very, very functional, real way, how we spend our time determines what we prioritize. And it's probably no surprise here, the first week of the year, that your pastor, it would start a series about seeking God first. And the biggest challenge for you, first of all, would be to prioritize time in seeking God this year. Surprise. Not that big of a surprise. But I really want us to think about, to do that, what does it mean very, very practically? It means it's going to be reflected in your calendars. It means that your daily, your weekly, your monthly schedules reflect that you've actually given time to seek God first. Now, I know that this is difficult because we live in a day and age, you could argue that there's probably never been a day and age that's more difficult to seek God first as our first priority, because we have thousands and thousands of distractions in our everyday lives, don't we? We've got devices, entertainment options, news sources, playlists, ease of travel. We have demanding lives and busy lives, and our work's demanding a lot of us. Some of us have social engagements and activities and hobbies. Those of us who have kids' lives and everything that's built around their lives. It is hard, right, to make God our first priority, but we can do it. Simply put, most of the time we're actually too distracted or we're too busy. That those are the things that really get us. We're too distracted by other things, we're too busy with other things, and it's reflected in how we spend our time. And I want to agree from the start that this is very, very difficult. This is what a Catholic theologian says, kind of a long quote, but I love it. Today, a number of historical circumstances are blindly flowing together and accidentally conspiring to produce a climate within which it's difficult not just to think about God or to pray, but simply to have an interior depth whatsoever. We, for whatever reason, good or bad, are distracting ourselves into spiritual oblivion. It's not that we have anything against God, depth, and spirit. We would like these. It's just that we're habitually too preoccupied to have any of these show up on our radar screens. We are more busy than bad, more distracted than non-spiritual, more interested in a movie theater, the sports stadium, the shopping mall, and the fantasy life they produce in us than we are in church. Pathological busyness, distraction, and restlessness are major blocks today within our spiritual lives. All that to say, I'm with you. I admit it. It is hard to seek God first, but I hope today we'll receive a challenge to do so, and the scripture that we look at can help us think about how we can do so in the coming year. So if you'll stand, we'll read for the scripture this morning. It's a passage familiar to many of us from Luke chapter 10. As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, "Lord, don't you care about my sister who's left me to do all the work by myself? Tell her to help me." "Martha, Martha," the Lord answered, "you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken from her." This is the word of the Lord. All right, you can grab a seat. I'm sure that for many of you, this is a very, very similar story. And so my prayer this week has been that God would open our eyes to see it in a new way. It was actually my prayer for myself as I've read and studied and prepared this very familiar story too. Or maybe you haven't heard this story, or maybe only once or twice, and same thing. My prayer is that it will open our eyes in a new way. Quite simply, to keep it with an alliteration, we're going to talk about two types of lives. A distracted life, which we see in Mary, and then a devoted life. We see in Martha, and then the devoted life that we see in Mary. So let's talk first about the distracted life. First, I want to give a little bit of background on who these characters are. Mary and Martha were sisters, and they had a brother not mentioned in this passage, but mentioned elsewhere. Their brother was Lazarus, the one that Jesus rose from the dead. And so Mary and Martha and Lazarus were great followers. They weren't among the 12 disciples, but they were around that extra band of devoted followers of Jesus. Jesus loved them. We read in John that when Lazarus died, Jesus wept. So this is a very loving relationship with great devotion. We know too from John about this family is that they had a house in Bethany. Bethany's about 2 miles east of Jerusalem. And so it was a very easy place for people to visit, particularly if people were coming to the different festivals that were in Jerusalem. You could say this was like an ancient Airbnb, was Mary and Martha's house and Lazarus' house. This is their house. They were an Airbnb for Jesus and his disciples. And so this happened often with them. And so at Martha's invitation, Jesus and his followers are coming to stay. And while Mary is presumably sitting with the other disciples, listening to Jesus, the other disciples are there too. You know the story. Martha's in the background, preoccupied, distracted, it says, by doing many different things. Most likely that entailed the hospitality things, making food, making drinks, cleaning the house, doing whatever she had to do in a good heart to try to please Jesus and to make a great environment, which is a good thing we'll talk about in a minute. I thought it would be fun, because I love The Chosen, if we looked at a few of The Chosen videos here to capture kind of what this may have looked like, to inspire our imaginations as we go a little bit further in the text. So let's run the first Chosen video here.
That reminds me of a story. Is everything all right, Martha?
I'm fine, just I got to carry on.
She's.
Please, continue.
Okay. The kingdom of heaven is like the master of a house who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. After agreeing with the laborers for a denarius a day, he sent them into his vineyard.
You make it sound so simple.
And going out about the third hour, he saw others standing idle in the marketplace. And to them he said, "You, go into the vineyard too, and whatever is right, I will give you." So they went. Going out again about the sixth hour and the ninth hour, he did the same. And about the 11th hour, he went out and found others standing. He said to them, "Why do you stand here idle all day?" They said to him, "Because no one has hired us." He said to them, "You, go into the vineyard too." When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, "Call the laborers, pay them their wages."
Pretty funny, right? I've given that look to somebody before. You have too. Martha, it says, was what? Distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. Now, this word distraction is pretty fun, and when I studied it this week to understand what it really means, it means to really be pulled in different directions. It could be translated like actually dragged away or torn apart. That was later translated into Latin and French, and they used it for a word that meant to pull people apart. Literally, it was a word that was used that was called distraction, what we would call quartering, when you put one arm on a horse and two legs on different horses, and as a form of torture, they would tear people apart and send them in different directions. Very gruesome, right? But it's a good idea of what distraction means. It means that we've got things pulling at us. In our vernacular, we would say what? I just feel pulled in so many directions, right? That's distraction, being pulled in many directions. Let me ask you, do you feel that kind of distraction in life? Do you feel like you're pulled in too many directions to seek God first and his kingdom? Well, I get it, because that's the world that we live in. But we can do it together, as we'll explore in this passage. Now, before we get too hard on Martha, I want to say a few things about her. Let's at first admit that we can all be Marthas, right? We can say that, so we don't have to worry about that. We can also admit that she was doing something that was very good and important. What she was doing was great. She was trying to serve her Lord and Savior. What she was doing was excellent. So this is not about whether you serve or don't serve. This is about misordering what you're doing. It's not that we can't do good things for Jesus or in our lives or for our families. They're all great things that we could do, many things that could take up our time. The question is, what order are they in? And so this is a story about order and misplaced order. Particularly if you find out where it's placed in the Gospel of Matthew, so what you get here, or Gospel of Luke rather, what's really interesting is this comes right on the heels of one of the greatest parables that Jesus teaches, on the parable of the Good Samaritan. And what do you remember about the parable of the Good Samaritan? What was it about? It was about the three people who didn't have time to help someone, but one person did, the Good Samaritan. So it's not that we're not supposed to serve. The very next parable, the parable before this one, was a parable about how we need to give our time to other things to serve and love people and care for people. I don't know if Luke did it on purpose, but maybe he's putting this story right next to the other one to say, yes, we're called to serve, but let's not have our order misplaced because we're supposed to worship as a means to work. That our work comes after our worship. And work can mean many things. It could mean the things the way you serve and love your family. It could mean your social engagement with your friends. It could be all the things that take our time, serving your church, serving a mission, your actual work. But if you put work ahead of worship, you're in trouble. And that's what this passage is about. So don't misunderstand the story of Mary and Martha to think that serving's not important. We need to work, but worship has to come before all the other work that God calls us to do. So look what happens to Martha. What does it say happened to her when Jesus speaks to her? He says, you're worried and upset about many things. Other translations say anxious and upset. So do you see what happens when you misplace things, when you place your work, all the other things God's called you to do ahead of your worship, not seeking God first, but God second or third or down the road, what happens? You end up anxious and worried about many things. Worried, anxious, upset, irritable, easily frustrated. That's not the way you want to live, is it? When they're misplaced, that's what's going to happen in your life. Not only that, when you do start to serve, particularly if you're serving in ministry or doing something here in the church or in any other way that God calls you to serve, even in your family, what happens? If you put work before worship, you start to compare yourselves to others and judge others and look down on them like Martha had been doing. Not only that, if you continue to do work ahead of worship, what can happen? You can actually get to the place to be as bold as Martha to tell Jesus what to do and be angry at God. Crazy part of the story, right? She asks him a question and tells him what to do. Tell her to help me. This is what I want you to hear. These are all the things that will happen inside you, will happen in your soul, will happen in your spirit, will happen in your attitude, will happen in everything that you're doing in life if you misplace these two things. All the other work God has you to do is secondary to the first work, and that's to worship. And that's not the kind of fruit that you want to see born out in your life, is it? You don't want the Martha kind of fruit. You want the Mary kind of fruit. Now, this has always been a super tough passage for someone like me. So Jake was the one who assigned it to me. You can thank him. Because I'm a doer, man. I like to get stuff done. And if you've ever taken the Strength Finders test, anyone ever read that book or taken the Strength Finders test? My number one is achiever, which means that you're the person who gets up and the first thing you want to do is start getting to your to-do list. And you write it out by hand so that you can cross it off because it feels so much better to cross it off. First thing I do is make my bed because boom, check, one thing done right away. Let's get going. Those of you who know me well can attest that this is the way that I am in the world. Brenda can certainly attest to it more than others. I laughed that at my old job, I did campus ministry at UT for 20 years before coming on staff at Midtown. And one of the staff people affectionately changed my title to the pastor of Get Things Done. And I loved it. I wore it. I accepted it. But for me, knowing that I'm prone to be a Martha, that means that I have to discipline myself every single day. And for me, that means spending time with God each morning before I go into my day, before I go into my to-do list. And we all have different personalities. We all have different temperaments. We all have different gifts and situations in life and other commitments that we have in our life. But for me, that's essential. And I notice the times when I don't spend time with God, I more tend to be upset and anxious about many things. But when I do, my whole day lines up differently. My priorities change because of that, and my peace is extended, and things change for me. Very early after college, I studied under a pastor named Tom Nelson, and he was teaching a lot of men, about 30 different men that were wanting to be pastors. And one of the things that he said that stuck with me that I've always kept memorized is this: if your output is greater than your intake, then your upkeep will be your downfall. You get it? If your output is greater than your intake, then your upkeep will be your downfall. Meaning for what you're pouring out, whether it's with your family or in ministry or in life, in your workplace, or in all of the different things that God called you to do, if your output exceeds your intake of sitting at the feet of Jesus, worshiping him, you can't sustain it. Your upkeep of that will become your downfall. You can't handle it. We're not meant. So as you think about this new year, I want you to know that you cannot survive without prioritizing worship over all the other work that God calls you to. Whatever your work might be, whether it's your job or your family life or your hobbies, a calendar full of those things is sure to suffer if your commitment is not to seek God first above those things. If you don't make time for God in your calendar, you're going to suffer for it. And so I'm not trying to make you feel guilty about if you do or don't spend time with God or how much time you spend with God. My real motivation is to tell you this isn't good for you. You don't want to end up anxious about many things, worried about many things, distracted by many things. You want to let your time and worship even align your heart so that when you go out and then do the work that God's called you to do, you're doing it from a place of worship. And your heart is aligned, your priorities are in order because God has given you that peace, he's given you that clarity, he sets you on your path for that day or for that week. So how do you feel heading into the new year? Would you say you're already feeling anxious? Upset by many things? Would you say that you're distracted by all the things that need to be done or worried about the things that have not yet been done? I want to tell you, it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't. As you start the new year, the challenge is for you to carve out time to seek God first and make the challenge to make him a priority in your actual calendar. You'll see the realigning of your priorities. You'll see the spirit of your heart begin to change and shift because of it. That's what we can do when we listen to God at his feet like Mary. So that's the distracted life. Now let's spend a little bit of time talking about the devoted life. Let me even just read our passage one more time that maybe God would draw something out to you in it again. As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations she had to make. She came to him and asked, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me." "Martha, Martha," the Lord answered, "you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen what's better, and it will not be taken from her." You see, Mary, she placed worship ahead of work, and she was rewarded for it. Jesus would say that she chose the better thing, and it would not be taken from her. What's interesting about Mary is this is not the only time that you see her at Jesus' feet. The other two other times that you see Mary, she's at Jesus' feet. So this is not a one-time practice for her. This is a lifestyle for her. In John chapter 11, when Jesus arrives after Lazarus had died, before we raised him from the dead, Mary goes to his feet and weeps and prays. The very next chapter, John chapter 12, Mary's at Jesus' feet, anointing his feet, that Jesus said this would be for my burial. And here again, Mary is at Jesus' feet. This is a lifestyle. This is a regular thing in the way that she approached her Lord and Savior. And she chose what was better, it says, and it says this will not be taken from her, meaning that the things that she's done, that the time that she spent with Jesus is eternal. It's not going to be taken from her. The time that she's invested by doing this is going to last for eternity. There's plenty of work that we can do, but it cannot be replaced by the time that we spend with Jesus. Now, I want to get one thing straight in this passage. It could be misinterpreted. When Jesus says, "Martha, Martha," it's not like when your parents called you by your first and last name when you were in trouble, right? This is actually a term of endearment. That's actually an invitation. You see this throughout Scripture. When God first called Abraham, he called out, "Abraham, Abraham." He did the same with Jacob. When Moses was seeing in the burning bush, when God was in the burning bush, he calls out, "Moses, Moses." When David wept after his son Absalom died, what did he say? "Absalom, oh Absalom." When Peter was about to be tempted by the devil, his other name was Simon, but Jesus comes to him and says, "Simon, Simon, Satan has asked to sift you like wheat, but I've prayed for you that when you fall, you'll go back and strengthen your brothers." Or think about Jesus on the last week of his life as he's approaching Jerusalem, knowing this was it. He looks out over the city and he says, "Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how I've longed to gather you under my wings like a hen does its chicks, but you would have none of it." So don't get it wrong. This isn't a rebuke. This isn't Martha. This is Martha, Martha. Martha, sit down. You've got some things wrong. He wanted something better for Martha. He wanted to point out the better way and how worship over work would be better for her. He wanted what was good for her. And so don't hear from this message and a challenge to seek God first and put him first. Don't hear the voice of God or the voice of the Spirit telling you, "I'm going to pick on you, Cliff." Cliff, No. He's saying, Cliff. It's an invitation. It's an invitation for something better, that Jesus wants something better for you. To prioritize your time is for your good, and it's an invitation, and he loves to share it with you. Let's see how it is depicted by the creators of The Chosen and the actors there in part number 2 here.
Thank you. This looks delightful.
Would have been better if I didn't have to do it all alone.
Better.
Yes, better. More befitting of someone as important as you. It seems you didn't notice my sister has left me to serve alone. From the moment you got here, she hasn't done a thing to serve you. She's completely ignored everything I've been doing to make all of you comfortable, and it's clear that she's not going to notice how hard I'm working on her own. The only thing that could change it is if you tell her to help me.
Martha, please, sit down here with me.
How can I sit? Only half your followers have been served. We can discuss this later. I'm sorry.
I know, and I want others to hear this. There's nothing to be embarrassed about. You've done a wonderful thing. hospitality will always matter. And I am grateful for what you have done.
It's what you deserve, and more.
Your intention is well-meaning. But only one thing is truly necessary. The best way to serve me is to pay close attention to my words. That is the priority. That is what your sister has chosen. It is a good portion, and it will not be taken from her.
Taken.
Her food, the servings, they are wonderful. But they'll pass away with the rest of this world. My words, they'll never pass away. Mary has chosen to feast on something of eternal value. I want you all to hear this clearly. I do not rebuke Martha. Acts of service are beautiful. Action is good. You're doing what you thought was expected of you. And what you do is valuable. And Mary probably could have helped a little. But listen, I don't want you distracted from being able to be present with me and the friends that I have brought. I'm inviting you to something that is better. To sit at my feet, listen carefully to my words, and devour them as a meal more nourishing than actual food.
Powerful, huh? By watching that, do you see it as an invitation? It's an invitation for something better. It's an invitation to feast on the words of God, to reorganize your life and put Jesus first, his words first, and to let it be reflected in your calendar. It's the best thing that you can do for yourself. And like when Jesus looked at her, he's saying the same to you. I don't want you distracted by all these other things. We don't have to live a distracted life, even though the temptation is there. To quote from our favorite around here, John Mark Comer, he says, ultimately, nothing in this life, apart from God, can satisfy our desires. Tragically, we continue to chase after our desires ad infinitum. The result? A chronic state of restlessness, or worse, angst, anger, anxiety, disillusionment, depression, all of which lead to a life of hurry, a life of busyness, overload, shopping, materialism, careerism, a life of more, which in turn makes us more restless, and the cycle spirals out of control. To sum up his quote, if your output is greater than your intake, then your upkeep will be your downfall. We're not made to live like that. We're made to be in relationship with God, and only when we make time for it and spend time with him will we find our fulfillment, will we find our life in order. Let me draw you to a few specific words as it relates to the devoted life in Mary. Notice the first word there, chosen. Mary has chosen what is better. That means that we have a choice to make, guys. We have agency. We have control over our calendars. They do not control us. As much as busy as some of our lives can be, and maybe certain seasons are worse than others, we control our calendars. They don't master us. Mary has chosen to do this, and we too can make a choice. And so what I'm going to encourage you to do, if you're willing, is to make a choice, to go home this night, this day, and as you start this next full first week of the new year, to make a plan, to have a time and a place and a plan to meet with Jesus over this next year. Now, there's no prescribed way to do it. We all have different personalities, different schedules. I'd confess to you what mine were or what my issues are and how I know how I need to do it. You might need to do it in a different way. But I want us all to seek God this week and ask, how can we have God be built into our calendars and seeking him And to do that, we're going to need those three things. You're going to need a time. That's your calendar. You're going to need a place, a location, and you're going to need a plan. Time. I know I say that my time's in the morning. I know some people aren't morning people. It's been said that there's two types of people. There's people that wake up in the morning and say, "Good morning, Lord." There's others that wake up and say, "Good Lord, it's morning." I don't know. That might be you. So yours might not be that time. You've got to know yourself and your own personality, know your own schedules and your own busyness and your own situations, and to know and be real with yourself as to where you can really meet with God and where you're going to be distracted in your meeting with God. Some of you, that's a commute. I cannot believe that some of you guys can do this, but God bless you that you can. I get angry every time I drive in Austin. But some of you I know are able to listen to the Bible and pray while you commute. Maybe you can do that. Maybe you have a lunch break at work. We all have different schedules, a way that you can get away or sneak away. Or maybe it's stopping by a coffee house before or after work. Maybe it's in the evening after the kids go to bed. That's for you to decide. But seek God about a time. It's not going to happen unless you literally put it into your calendars. You need a place. Maybe it's your favorite chair. Maybe it's the porch. Maybe you like to go for walks. Or like I said, maybe you're one that likes to drive or likes to be at a coffee house. Pick a place. Decide not just when, but actually where you're going to spend time with God in this new year. And then you really need a plan. It's not good or wise just to walk into something and say, okay, I got the time and place, but I have no idea what I'm going to do. But seek God this week about a plan. Things like on the Bible apps, there's so many of them, so many different reading plans. There's the Bible Project and all the different videos and studies that you can do with that. I would always recommend starting with the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. If you really want to sit at Jesus' feet, then you read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, where you hear his teachings. I know that Brenda does the Bible in the year, every single year since I've known her. She's done the Bible in a year. I don't like to do the Bible in a year. I like to read those chunks of scripture and study it more in depth. And so we all have different personalities and temperaments. The idea is that you have to make a time and a place and a plan. And here's what I've noticed that happens. Now, we're all going to be on different scales of this, but it goes from desire to discipline to delight. Desire, discipline, delight. You have the desire to seek God first. Let that desire rise up in you. And at first, it might take place that it just starts out as just a discipline. I set it aside. This is what I'm doing. I've picked my time, place, and my plan, and now it's a discipline. But I promise, sit in the discipline long enough, and you will move toward delight, where it's no longer a discipline. It's something that you love to do, that you seek God first in his kingdom. That's what I want for you guys. This, by the way, is also why it's so good and important to be part of an MC or a huddle, because in our regular rhythms of our MCs and our huddles, you're around other people who are doing the same thing, and often you're agreeing to reading plans together. And beyond just the accountability of showing up, having done the time with God, more than that, it's actually what you learn from one another. Hearing how someone else connects with God differently from you and giving each other ideas and learning and exploring together. We've got to be in community to help each other seek God this way. So the first word I wanted you to pay attention to was Mary chose. It's a choice that we have. Second word is listen. This is what she did. What was she doing at Jesus' feet? She was listening. That's what she was doing. Whereas a distracted life can lead us to be anxious and upset, and so many voices in our society are constantly in our ears, in our earbuds, so to speak. We need to take time. And the purpose of getting this time with God is really just to listen, to let him speak to our hearts, to let the words of God be renewed in our hearts, that we can hear his voice. And while this passage that we're reading today doesn't necessarily say it, I'm convinced that the opposite effects of what the distracted life led to and worry and anxious about many things, the opposite is true as we begin to prioritize our time with God. I can think of at least three things that I think it does for us. First, we'll have more clarity. When we seek God first and his kingdom first, to hear from the Lord first, we'll have an amazing amount of clarity. So many other things and voices in your lives will fade in the distance. You'll have a great clarity, and the order of your day will prioritize itself because you've sought God first. Great clarity comes from seeking God this way. There's great peace that comes from God. When you seek God first and his kingdom first, and you hear and listen to the Lord each day, you're going to experience more and more peace, because all your worries and anxieties that you present to the Lord, he gives you peace. And you walk into the day more confident that he's with you and that he's in control. And we'll have more joy. When we seek first things first and make it a point to listen to God, we're going to have increasing joy. When we make a relationship with God, it's one of Jesus' biggest promises when he said, if you abide in me, your joy will be made complete. Which do you want? Clarity, peace, and joy? Or anxious and worried about many things? That's really what's before you. I could list more fruits that would come from spending time with God, but those are at least a few. Let's wrap up by actually just mentioning one more thing that Jesus said here. Notice the volume of words that are here. Martha, Martha, the Lord answered, you are worried and upset about what? Many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. You see the progression there? Mary has chosen what's better. It's not going to be taken from her. I close with this last point to say sometimes, my friends, we're simply doing too many things. And as we walk into the series this week and the next 2 weeks, and we're talking the whole series about how we can create margin to seek God first in this next year, the fact is there might be some things we need to stop doing. Because practically speaking, if we're talking about making time for God, sometimes that means, maybe every time it means, at what expense? Like what's going to get cut out of me making time for God? And sometimes we have to look at our many things and decide, I need to get rid of some of those things so I can have a few things that will help me focus on the one thing. And I don't know what that is for you. Maybe it's a hobby. Maybe it's things happening with the kids, or maybe it's your entertainment habits, or dare I say it, maybe it's even sleep. But there's things that we have to consider while we go through this series together about what are the many things that maybe we need to be cut back. Because if you're really going to make time in your calendars, usually that means at the expense of something else. And so my invitation to you here as we close is to think about what that might be for you. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe you just need to get up earlier, or maybe there's something that you don't need to cut out. But likely there's something that you need to cut out to take your many to a few so you can have the one and the better thing. So as we prepare for communion, I'm going to give you a little space to seek God so our communion servers can go distribute them. I want to keep these few verses in front of you and give you a chance just to silently seek the Lord on a couple questions. And after you receive your elements, I'm actually going to change things up here on this first week of the year. I don't know why I felt led to do this, but I want us to pray the Lord's Prayer before we take communion, because part of it is just a confession. There's a confession part of the Lord's Prayer that we can receive, and just an opening kind of prayer that we can all pray together as we head into this new year. But I want to bring these verses before you and give you a chance just to ponder them and to think about these questions that I'll pose. First, now I'm actually going to ask us to read these out loud together like we did before. So Matthew 6:33, ready? But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. And then go into Luke 10 again. Martha, Martha, the Lord answered, you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. I pose these two questions for you to consider before we take communion. What are the many things that distract you and keep you busy? And then what can you do to focus on the few things that can help you seek first the one thing? Seek the Lord for a few minutes here in prayer. We'll pray the Lord's Prayer and then take communion together.